So yeah, let's get started. I'm very excited because this is a topic that I really like. I think that the command line is really fun and can be extremely playful, and um, some people begrudgingly use it, some people embrace it, but you can really make it super fun. And so Unix shells, Bash, Z shell, K shell, etc., they come with all of the classic utilities, grep, find, etc. And those are still available. And I think it is still extremely important to know how to use them, because if you access some systems, those are the only tools you will be able to use. And so having a basic knowledge of them is probably a good idea. But in recent times, tons of modern utilities that are written in different languages that are more fun, bringing a lot of color and user-friendliness in the command line have been developed. They're all free and open source, and for the vast majority of them, they are on GitHub. And there's really no reason not to take advantage of that. And now, how do you choose a tool? Because there are lots and lots of them out there. So of course, you can attend webinars such as these, and you can learn from your friends. I recently learned of a new tool from one of my course attendees, so your peers. Then, of course, there are all the geeky forums out there. But you can also just do some Googling and look around what is a good tool for X. And then if you're not sure whether or not that's a tool that might be worth considering and testing, you could look at the popularity. So that's the number of stars on GitHub. And an obscure tool can be excellent. So it doesn't mean that a tool with 5 stars is something you shouldn't consider, but that's going to tell you something. Probably more important is it maintained? And you can check the date of the last commit. And a tool that hasn't seen any commit in years might still work, might still be fine. Some things don't need to change, but it's more likely to be broken, let alone if it's been archived. Well, that's a big red flag there. Then you can look at the documentation, and that's just for your own convenience. Great tools with no documentation can be fine, but it's going to be more work on your end. And maybe this is what I'm trying to pay a lot more attention to these days. How fast is it? And to know that before testing everything is to look at what language it's written in. And of course, the language is not everything. Some tools are better written than others, and so they will work more efficiently than others, regardless of language. But the language will tell you a lot of info. And if you look at any GitHub repo, you can see the languages used for the project. And so that's where you can check it out. And sometimes in the README, they do mention it too. And a lot of those tools were initially written in some scripting language, like in Shell, Bash, etc., or in Python. And those, they're still great, and they might be fantastic for you, but they tend to be slower. And those written in compiled languages will be faster. And a number of years ago, Go had really like a boom, and everybody was building tools in Go. There was Hugo, and I mean, everything was in Go. These days, it seems like the cool kids are all building tools in Rust or using tools building in Rust. So lots of the tools I'm going to talk about here are actually written in Rust, which is really in fashion and indeed fast. So let's get started. Everybody knows the ls utility, but it's a bit drab, so you can bring color to your file listing with ESA. And so it's just a replacement for ls, meaning that you can just use ESA whenever you used to use ls, but it adds color, it has better default, and it adds a tree feature. So how do you install it? For every single tool, I posted a link to the installation instruction to install it on your machine. And so you can just follow these links and set that up. And all of the tools that I'm presenting here are beautifully documented. So the instructions are very clear, and the installation should be absolutely easy. Now, on the Alliance clusters, you do not have root access, meaning that you cannot install utilities system-wide. I asked the Alliance clusters maintainers to install a number of these utilities. So quite a few of these utilities are actually already installed on the Alliance clusters, which is super cool, but not all of them. And the ones that aren't installed, I'm gonna give you detailed instructions on how to do it, because you have to install them locally, meaning under your own username, since that's all you can do on the Alliance cluster, unless you open a ticket and ask for something to be installed more globally. So for ESA, it's one of those cool kids tool written in Rust. So to install it, you can load a Rust module and then run the cargo, which is the Rust installer utility to install ESA. So cargo install ESA will install the binary in a .cargo bin path in your home directory. The installation will take some time, so be patient. That's going to take a while, but you only have to do this once. Afterwards, ESA is installed, so you don't have to ever load the Rust module again to access ESA. Now, you have to ensure that this binary is in your path, so you will have to ensure or add this to your path on your .bashrc file to access it. So now, the usage, oops, how do I get out of this caret thing? Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, something is weird. Okay, sorry about that. So the usage, as I said, is super straightforward. So let me quickly, yeah. Instead of typing the classic ls, which gives an output all in white, I can just type ESA, and oh fun, I have colors. And not only I have colors, but the colors are actually meaningful. The directories are in a certain color, the files are in another color, the symlinks are in another color. All of these yellow files, they're yellow because they're SCSS files and MD file. But if I go to, for instance, this directory, okay, not convincing, but let me touch test.py. I'm creating a Python script real quick. Now you can see that, okay, the Python script is in a different color from the QMD file, etc. So, okay, that's nicer. Another thing that is a little bit of an improvement over ls is that ls-al are the two flags that ask to show all of the files and directories, including hidden ones and in a long format, gives, I mean, really, why the people writing ls thought that was a good idea, gives the file sizes in something that is a bit of an eye squint. And also the you have two columns after the permissions that give the group, the user and then the group. And the group is useful sometimes, but I mean, really very seldom. So ESA with the AL flags will not only add all of the nice colors, but it will automatically give the size in a human readable format, which is the equivalent of the ls with the H flag, and it will also remove the group. Of course, you can, by adding a capital G flag, see the group, obviously. It's just the defaults are different. And then finally, there is a utility called tree. And so, for instance, if I do tree Python, it shows the Python directory in this nice tree-like structure. You can run it in the working directory, but because it shows everything, that can be a little bit overwhelming. But if you run ESA -t Python, you can see it with the nice little colors directly, and you don't need the tree utility. Now, ESA is quite a horrible one to type. The Z is something that is really tough, so you can just create an alias, and you do that by adding in your .bashrc or .zshellrc this little line so that it gets sourced each time you log into your shell. And then now if I type ls, I have actually ESA that's running. And if I ever want to access the original ls, then no biggie. I just need to put a backward slash, and that's the way to access the unaliased ls name, so the initial utility. So very easy. Now there's an alternative. I used to use that before I discovered ESA. So you can look into that if for whatever reason ESA doesn't work, or if on the Alliance clusters you don't want to bother with this whole big cargo install. That's not as cool, but it's actually quite nice. I've used it. I used it for a year. Now, cat is the utility that outputs the content of a file to the screen, and there is a fantastic replacement called bat, and it adds syntax highlighting for really like almost all programming languages. It adds line number, and it outputs things in a pager like actually in your pager, in your default pager, so less often. So that means that you can do a search, you can do the classic pager navigation. And it is already installed on the Alliance clusters. So on the Alliance clusters, you can just type bat instead of cat, and for your machine instructions there. So if I were to run cat and then some Python script. Okay, so it actually looks pretty cool because I have I have ccat aliased to cat, so it actually looks nicer than it normally would. Yeah, so if you cat a script without any alias, but the actual cat command, it just outputs it onto the screen. And that's fine, but if your screen is very long, you have to scroll back, assuming your terminal even has the ability to scroll back. And I mean, it's just a very basic utility, just output some content. Now, if you run bat instead of cat, you have nice fancy syntax highlighting, you have the column, the line numbers, and you can navigate it the way you navigate the pager, going to the top, the bottom. You can do a search for, I don't know, Vancouver, okay, Vancouver's over here, etc. Now, if you don't like all of the stuff around, you can remove the fancy frame and still have all the rest of the utility. And you can even, with a P for plain, remove also the line numbers. And then you just have the syntax highlighting and the pager. And of course, you can customize your pager. You can do all sorts of things. You can even look at diff inside that, so it's pretty cool. Now, find is a really tremendously useful utility because it allows you to find files in your file system that match a number of criteria, whether, files or directories. So whether they match a certain pattern, whether they're a file, whether they have some extension, etc., etc. But find is not the fastest command, and also it has a very unintuitive syntax that a lot of people find a little bit rough at first. So there is this FD alternative that is a lot faster, is a lot more user-friendly, has different default, and it's just great. So it's also written in Rust, and it it runs in parallel automatically so that you have a much, much faster performance out of the box. Also by default, but these can be overwritten. It's gonna ignore hidden files, it's gonna ignore binaries, and it's gonna ignore anything that is in a .gitignore file if you're in a Git repo, or in some .ignore file that you can create for a number of utilities, including FD. So that also contribute to make it really, really fast. It is installed on the Erlang clusters, so you can use it right out of the box. Instructions here for your machine. So how do you use it? Well, the syntax is so much easier than find. The first argument is simply to put one argument after FD. Sorry, I was distracted by the chat. So with a single argument, find will simply search for the pattern you are typing in the current directory recursively, meaning entering any subdirectory below you. So boom, and there is some syntax highlighting in the output, which is nice. Now, note that find uses regular expression by default. So if out of all of these outputs, I'm looking for any one that ends with txt, I can type .*txt, which is a regular expression pattern, and that's going to narrow that down. If you want to use globing pattern instead, there is a G flag to use globs, but default is regular expression, which I think is a lot better. Now, if you add a second argument, you can search in a directory. So here I'm passing two arguments. First argument is the pattern I am searching. Second argument is the directory I am searching into. And again, search is recursive. So boom. You can actually use it without any argument. And in that case, it will output all of the files in the current directory. And if you want to do the same thing, but in a different directory than the current directory, then you need to use it with that dot. So if I run fd, I'm outputting everything in the current directory. Everything minus the hidden files and the binaries and anything that is in my .gitignore, etc. If I want to look at everything that is in the bash directory, I need that little dot, and there we go. With the E flag, you can search for some particular extensions. As I said before, you can use globing patterns instead of regex if you prefer. And then, as with the classic find, you can execute command with the X flag. But in that case, there are two versions. There is a lowercase x and a capital case X. So the difference is that with the lowercase x, each output of find will be passed into the command followed by X. So you will have, so if fd outputs a single file, then, well, that's irrelevant. But if fd outputs say 5 files, each 5 files in parallel will be passed to the following command. Well, with a capital X, the list of the 5 files will be passed at once. So there is a single command run afterwards as 5 arguments to the following command. So for instance, if I look at, well, let's show you the output of this again. If I look at the pattern top in my bash directory, I have 3 of them. Okay, so now if I use the lowercase x and I want to grep, but I'm going to use rg. I'm going a little bit overhead here. rg, I'm going to talk about in a sec, is a command to grep, so to look for a pattern into the file. So I am going to look at the pattern layout in each of those 3 outputs, and 2 of the files have this pattern, 1 doesn't, and so I have an output like that. Now, what happens if I run the same thing but with a capital X? I get the same outputs because I'm still looking for layout in those 3 files, but if you if you run the command rg on multiple files, it gives a little header with the file name before giving the output. So the second command is the equivalent of passing running the command rg, looking for the pattern layout in 3 files. While the second command, I'm running rg layout on a single file, but I'm doing that 3 times in parallel, and it gets output together at the end. So depending on what you want to do, one or the other is what you want to run, and it's really cool to have both options. Now, I showed you how to use a tree a little bit, tree earlier. Like for instance, if I run tree into bash, I have this formatted, nested diagram of what's in bash. But as you can see, it's just hellish because I have so much in there. It's just, oh my God. It's just not very useful. Tree directly is very useful if you search for a small directory. For instance, if I run tree into bash emj, which is a subdirectory of bash, yeah, okay, it's great, perfect. But on big directories, there's too much, including a ton of hidden files and a ton of stuff that you have put in your gitignore because they're outputs of some script, they're images, they're all sorts of stuff that have nothing to do with scripts and the kind of stuff you write. It's very cluttered. So you can use this fd command as a way actually to filter for tree what you're gonna actually output. And so if you use tree with the from file flag, you can use the output of fd piped to get something a lot nicer, a lot decluttered. So I'm doing the same thing here, but removing all of the stuff that's hidden by fd by default, and it's removed a lot of the clutter, and this is actually a lot more useful than tree out of the box. And of course, you can turn this thing into a function. For instance, you could create the ft function for a find tree and put that stuff. You can add some flags to fd if you want to customize it in your function, and then you can have some new tree function that's just a little bit neater. And I say you can customize ft because you can exclude additional directories of pattern. For instance, you can exclude all of the txt files, or you can exclude the img directory, etc., etc. But by default, as I said, fd ignores a number of stuff. And some of them, like the binaries, I think that's great. But some of them, like what is in my gitignore, or what is or some of my ignore files, I actually don't want them to be ignored. And so you can run fd minus capital H if you want to stop fd from ignoring the hidden files, or with capital I to stop it from ignoring what's in your .ignore or .gitignore file. And the two of them combined can be, the two of them are combined in the U flag, U for unrestricted. So if you run fd minus U, it's gonna just put everything, including your .git and everything. So that's not the answer, that's not the solution, because we're back to the find problem that just has too much stuff. So my solution that I've been using for a long time is to do all of that so that I don't have the defaults, because some of the stuff ignored by default I actually want, but then I ignore, thanks to ignore file, a number of patterns that I put in this file. And this file, it doesn't have to be called .fdignore, that I chose that name. You can put any file in there and pass it to the ignore file flag. And this .fdignore absolutely follows the gitignore syntax. So if you've ever written a gitignore, you are capable of writing that ignore file. And so once I've aliased that, my fd command has the behavior that I want it to have. It has it shows what I want it to show, and it decluttered the stuff that annoys me. So then if I run the tree from file, it works well for me. And then, of course, if you were to go that route, what you put in this ignore file is absolutely up to you, depending on your workflow and what you want or don't want to see. Now, I mentioned the RG command. So RG is the binary from the utility ripgrep, and ripgrep is a replacement for grep. And it is very, very similar in its philosophy as FD. They're both written in Rust. They both run things automatically in parallel, so same performance idea. They both exclude patterns from gitignore and ignore file and binary and hidden file out of the box. So very similar, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but you can also remove those hidden defaults. You can create your own ignore file if you'd rather. You can customize them at will, but they will just work a lot faster than grep. And so if you pass two arguments, the first one is the pattern you're looking for. The second one is a file. So if you're looking for a pattern in a single file, but you can also look for a pattern in every single file in the current directory recursively if you just pass a single argument. And similarly, it uses regular expression by default, but you can use the G flag if you'd rather use loading pattern. So very same spirit. So everything I've said about find, you can apply it to RG. Now, something totally different. There is this CD command, which might be the second or third command that you learn when you start playing with the command line. And it stands for change directory, and it's a way to navigate your system. And when you take a bash course, you have to learn about relative path and absolute path and how to navigate with the dot and all this stuff. And it's important to know it. It's important to understand the Linux file system and to know how to navigate it. But CD is just the slightest typo in the path, and that's it. You can't get anywhere. Or you have to know your file system perfectly to know exactly the exact path of where you want to go, or the exact path relative to where you are. So it's fine, but it's just not on a day-to-day basis something that's very flowy. And I mean, we have performant computers now, and we have all these like Vim tools that are capable to do things very fast on the computer. So why not do the same thing on the command line, right? So Zoxide allows you to do just that and jump anywhere right away. And it does that, instructions. So the installations are here, and FZF, which is a tool that I will talk about later on, works beautifully with Zoxide. So if you install Zoxide, you might want to consider also installing FZF, because that adds some even cooler functionality. So on the Alliance cluster, it is not installed, but it is actually really easy. You can install the binary in local bin or wherever you want for that matter, and then add wherever you've installed it to your path by modifying your path in your bashrc. And then you have to add this little line to ensure that it works in your shell. So if you are using bash, you type this, but if you are using Z shell, you replace Z shell here and you put it, of course, in your .z shell rc instead of your .bash rc. Now, Z, as in ESA, is really a hell of a keyboard. I find it absolutely rough to type. So luckily, you can actually choose the key of your choice to use Zoxide. And so if you want to replace this rough Z by, for instance, J, in the previous command, when you add this little stuff in your shell config, you just have to add this command and then the letter of your choice, and then it's going to replace Z by whatever you chose. So in my case, I have J, so I'm going to use J in the examples. Out of the box, you have to use Z. So then you type Z, or in my case, G, and then where you want to go. So if you type it without any argument, it takes you to your home. So I customized my prompt in this absolutely goofy, insane stuff just for this webinar, but I did add the last bit of the path of where we are in the square brackets. So pay attention to what's in the square bracket here. So I was in Mint, I typed J, enter, and now I'm in home. Like you can see, I am in my home. But now, directories where I go all the time, a single letter is enough to take me there. Mint, which is the website that's in front of you. So it's a place where I go all the time because this is where I do most of my work. I just have to type JM and boom. And if you look at the path, it's not like Mint was in my home. Mint was in Prague, that was in Parvus, that was in Marie. So because Zoxide keeps a database based on not only how often you visit a directory, but also how recently you visited a directory, if there is any conflict, and obviously with a single letter, you can imagine that in my system, I have more than one directory that contains M in it, right? The reason it took me to that one is because that's the one where I go all the time. If I want to go to something else that has M, I will have to give a little bit more info, of course. If you go to something for the first time, you can use it as a classic CD. So if the path is not in the database, you will have to use it really, yeah, like a very classic CD command. Now, what is even more cool if you have FZF on your system is that you can do ZI, or in my case, JI, and it uses FZF to do a little auto-completion based on the on what you start typing. And here you can see really the top of that database. So you can see that Mint, that website, has like a really high score since I go there like multiple times a day. And so that's why a single letter is enough. And then you can see the decreasing score. But so if I want to go in a totally different place, I can start typing things. So for instance, Yazzie plugins, or I don't know, config, Western, Z, I can type Z, Western, and boom, it takes me there. So that's really cool. And boom, I'm back in Mint. So it's just, I mean, I don't know, I find this just like so cool. Now, I discovered Zoxide actually thanks to one of you guys who at a course mentioned it, because I wasn't aware of it. It's a more recent tool, I believe also written in Rust, one of those cool Rust tools. Before that, I was using AutoJump. So AutoJump is written in Python, so it is slower, and you have to it doesn't work for paths that aren't in the database yet. So you have to use the cd command the first time you get into any directory. You can't use auto-jump on something it doesn't know, while Zoxide works everywhere since it replaces cd for something that's not in the database. And also there is now this very cool little SDF integration. So auto-jump is less good, let's face it, but it has inspired and influenced Zoxide, and it served me very well for many years. So I'm still putting it out there out of respect for the people who developed a tool that has helped me so much for so long. Now, FZF, that tool I've mentioned several times. So it's a fuzzy finder that works by narrowing completion. And you can install it here on your machine. It is already installed on the Alliance clusters, so you can use it directly without doing anything. But it also comes with some 3 cool key bindings. And if you want to make use of these cool key bindings, you need to add in your .bashrc this thing or your .zshellrc this stuff. If you want the full deal. So how does it work? Well, out of the box, if you just type FZF, it opens and you can customize the UI like so much. You can have it from the bottom up, from the top down. You can have it with preview. You can sort it, not sort it a certain way. You can customize actions to be performed on whatever thing you select. You can do multiple selection. There's a ton of options. I'm not going to go over all of it, but it's very well documented, and the links are in the slides. But that allows you to select something in the current directory recursively. And as I start typing, for instance, bash, emg, Pose, okay, maybe I want this one, boom. By default, it just allows you to select something in your current directory recursively and output it like that. Now, FZF has all this stuff. Like if I type .git, there are all the Git file. There's my site. There's like all sorts of stuff in there. So it's a bit of hell. And what you can do is to define an environment variable called FZF default command that will set the default commands for FZDef when it is run directly in this fashion. And in here, you can put anything you want. And because I already have this alias for FD that does exactly what I want when I'm looking for a file, well, great. I'm just going to put that in my FZF default command variable, boom. And so you have to put this, of course, in your .bashrc or .zshell if you want it to be sourced each time you run your shell. And now if I run FZF, I have a ton less clutter. Like if I look for site, which is the output with all the HTML files of my website, it's not in there because that's junk. Those are output file. I don't care about those. What I want to see are my own file that I need to edit. So that's a nice way to declutter the command out of the box. Now, those 3 key bindings that are really cool, if you have entered the integrated it for your shell, are CT, CR, and Alt or M or like that one next to the space C. So CT will pass the selected file or directory into the command line. Because I showed you, you can select a file this way, like for instance, AI, GX, JIT, okay, like maybe, okay, this one, boom. But then you have to copy it, paste it into a command. I mean, that's plenty. If I want to copy that file in the current directory, I can do cp, like I start typing my command, and then Control-T, boom, it kicks in the stuff. And now I can look for it, gx, requirement, ext. Oh, it's actually a bit harder. There we go. It's over here. Took, and it passed it directly in the middle of my command. Beautiful. And then hook, I can put a dot for here. And there we go, done. So this CT is super convenient because it allows you to select any file or directory while you're typing commands. CR similarly allows you to look for command in your history. So for instance, I don't know, I ran some fd command earlier, dot bash. Okay, yeah, this one. Let's rerun this one. It puts it on your command line, so you could edit it if you wanted, and then you can rerun it. Super convenient. Alt-C is just as cool. It allows you to cd into a selected directory. Now, of course, if you use Zoxide that already has an integration with FZF, well, you already have something that's even better because it does the same thing, but in addition, it uses the Zoxide database. But if you don't have Zoxide, this is really cool because it allows you to jump into some directory. And Zoxide will look at your entire system. Well, this Alt-C, because it's based on just FZF, will look at the current directory recursively. So if you're looking for something that is below your current directory, it might actually even be more convenient than using Zoxide. So there could be a use for it actually, even with Zoxide, because they do different things. One searches your entire file system, but based on that database that's based on your frequency, while the other one, there's no frequency of any kind, but it limits the search from your current working directory recursively. But the way people use FZF most of the time is actually to pipe the output of whatever command that returns a list of elements into FZF. So for instance, if you want to pipe the output of ls into FZF, you would run this. And then you can do whatever with it. Because again, FZF comes with all those flags that allow you to then perform whatever action on any of these things. The default without any flag being to just output the result into the standard output. So this one, of course, is not all that useful, but you can, for instance, if you're looking for a running process, use the PS with some useful flags commands. That does look at all the running processes and then pipe that into FZF, and then you can make it case insensitive and order it in a reverse fashion and like customize it a little bit more. And you can now look for your processes. So for instance, Emacs, I have a bunch of Emacs processes running. And obviously you can create some functions or aliases with these things. So because there's no freaking way you're gonna want to type this all the time, like it would be absurd and there's no way you can remember that. But if we create a proc alias, now proc will just work. So you can also write a number of functions, for instance, a function that would kill a process. And so the FZF in this whole thing is here, but it is combined with a number of things. So you can go very fancy with these things and have them in your .bashrc or .zshellrc so that you can really create some really cool functions. So for instance, let's do this one as an example. You can write a his_run function that's going to search through your history and run a command. And then you can run his_run and look at, okay, so for instance, RG color, maybe that one, and boom, it runs it. But you can use it in combination with Git. You can use it in combination with just absolutely everything you want. Now, let's talk about TUIs, because TUIs are just another really cool thing. What are TUIs? So everybody is familiar with graphical user interfaces. They're most software that people run on their machine. They're the nice, beautiful windows with the mouse and clicking and all that stuff. And it was a revolutionary thing when they came out, and everybody was astonished and loved it, and everybody's embraced it. And we are crippled with GUIs, and they're visual, they're beautiful, they're intuitive, but honestly, clicking a bunch of menus and doing things in GUIs, I find it hellish. You have to remember, oh yeah, okay, so to do this thing, I have to go to, I don't know, like the third tab, and then click, and then right click on this, and then it's like, oh my God, I have no memory, so to me, it's just hell. And then if you want to do the same thing 10 times, you have to do the freaking down thing 10 times. It's utterly inefficient. But before GUIs, to make the command line a little bit more visual, people came up with TUIs. So they are text-based, and they run in the terminal, but they also provide a nicer user interface. And because I'm not the only one who ate GUIs, TUIs, the old school stuff that runs in the terminal, haven't actually disappeared, and they haven't gone out of fashion. They're really very popular, and people are building them all the time. And there's like a whole repo of awesome TUIs, and you can see like a bazillion examples, and they're modern tools, and new ones keep being added, and they're written in Rust and fast languages, and they can be an interface to Git. Like I gave a webinar about lazy Git, which is exactly that a while back, but can also be a music player and emails and dashboards and whatever you like. But the ones I'm going to talk about today are the ones that allow you to search your file system, meaning like everything that has to do with your file system. So looking for a file, copying a file, renaming a file, moving a file, creating a file, creating a directory, navigating your file system, like all the stuff that you would do in GUIs such as Windows Explorer or Finder. You can do that in the command line without using a TUI by using Zoxide and the CP command and the RM command and the PWD command and all of those. But even with all the fun tools I've talked about, it's not very visual. It's one command at a time. And yes, there is tree where you can see a little bit of a structure, but oof. So here come the file system TUIs. And the two that were really the dominant ones for the longest of time were Ranger, written in Python. I used Ranger for many, many years, and I planned on actually talking about Ranger in this webinar. And then NNN, which is written in C and so much faster. So Ranger is like the super sophisticated, super easy to customize, endless features. Like you can do absolutely anything with it, and it's just, I love it. But it's written in Python, so it tends to be slow. And if you have directories with thousands of files, sometimes it's going to freeze on you or just be very slow if you do some copying operations between very, very big directories. NNN is like fast in C, boom, boom, minimalist. But if you want to customize something as simple as a key binding, you have to compile it from source, and it's just like really rough to get into. So I never actually really got into it because of this this burden of having to compile from source whenever you want to change anything. But now the new kid is of course in Rust, and it's called Yazzie. So it's 2 years old now, maybe not even 2 years old, like a year and a half old. So it's really brand new. But I found about it while developing this webinar, and I was so impressed that I actually switched from Ranger to Yazzie. It's out of the box integrates with all of the utilities I've talked about, like FD, RG, Zoxide, FZF, because it's really from that same like modern Rust kind of school. And it's as fast as NNN, instead of C, it's Rust. And in theory, I think it will be as good and as fancy and sophisticated as Ranger. Now, we're at version 0.4, so it's not fully mature. So there are still some stuff that are not implemented. And it's still a little bit immature, but I think it's really gonna be the tool. So anyway, that's the tool I'm using now. So let me show you a little demo. Let's make the screen a little bit bigger. So first, I'll show Ranger. So I have an alias for Ranger. So this is Ranger. So you can see my file system, like the current directory is written over here, and you can see everything that is in it. And then I can, there are Vim key bindings by default, but it's all customizable. I can navigate into things, and there are those cool previews with syntax highlighting, and I can, of course, navigate into things, and I can use like commands that I want to use, like at the bottom here, those are shell commands I can use, etc., etc. But because now I use Yazy, and because I think it is actually the best tool these days, let me show you Yazy. So I have a short, which is Y. So here I'm actually launching Yazy, and so it looks incredibly similar. Of course, the same idea, but it has a bunch of icons by default. And so same idea. This is the directory, and I can navigate into things, and you can see that there are the previews that are color-coded. That is really cool, and I can use Zoxide directly in it. So I can, for instance, go to Yazy plugins book. So now I've jumped into Yazy plugins, and I can, so Yazy is customizable in Lua scripting, which is very common in those Rust languages. They're written in Rust, which is compiled, which is really fast. But unlike NNN, for instance, which involves having to recompile the tool if you want to customize anything, here there is this Lua scripting that allows you to customize it without having to recompile everything. And so because I don't know Lua, I've been spending quite a lot of time learning Lua to customize my stuff. So out of the box, it works very nicely. But if you want to do like super fancy stuff and you have your little habits and you wanted to do like launch lazy git from the current tab, oh yeah, because you can, of course, create some tab, and like it can take some time to customize it to your liking. But out of the box, it does a fair amount of stuff. There are others. They have a lot less stars. They are written in slower things, or they're less popular. But there are actually other alternatives. I haven't tried them, so I don't know how good they are. I suppose that they are nice. So if for some reason Yazy doesn't cut it for you, you could explore these things. And then lastly, before we run out of time, I will say a word about Z-Shell plugins. So Z-Shell has this extremely popular and community maintained Oh My Z-Shell, which, I mean, like almost 200,000 stars. Like, this is huge. And so a ton of people swear by it. But I find that it has absolutely everything and anything, and it's really bloated. And yes, it comes with a lot of themes, and it comes with a lot of stuff that are integrated, but some of them can be buggy, or they can be heavy, or it might work for you. I did try it years ago, and I thought it was unnecessarily bloated. So I actually limited my Z-Shell customization to 3 plugins, and they're all inspired from Fish. So Fish is a modern shell that is utterly cool, that does a ton of fantastic things. It's really appealing. It's colorful, it's phenomenal, but it is not POSIX compliant, meaning that you cannot take a script written for Bash and run it into Fish. It's gonna require you to change a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, it's got all these cool features, but there's a real big downside to it. Well, Z Shell, which is now used by default by macOS, is POSIX compliant, and you can take a Bash script and run it into Z Shell. There are very, very slight things that you might have to modify, but it's like really on the margin. So there's no downside to using Z Shell. And those plugins, they come from Fish. So they bring in the coolest feature of Fish into Z Shell. So it's kind of like the pool of Fish without the downsides. So I think they're really cool. Now, one of them is already installed on the Alliance cluster, so you don't have to worry about it. It's the syntax highlighting one. The other one, you have to either install them, and you can look at the info on the README, and that's probably what you want to do on your own machine, or simply git clone them, and that's probably what you should do to keep it really simple on the Alliance cluster. So you can create a suitable directory and then git clone both of them into that directory. And then what you have to do, including to the one that is already installed on the Alliance cluster, is that you have to source those Z Shell scripts. So you have to put in your .zshellrc file this thing. And then that's it. So it's very, very simple. And so now, the reason when I type a command, such as, for instance, I don't know, I start typing a command, PW is not a command, and so it appears in red, but so if I were to run this, PW command not found, I don't have to run it to know it's not a command because it's in red. The instant I type D, PWD is a command, it turns into green. So I have syntax highlighting in my shell inputs. Or if I type CD and I type a path, like I have those nice colors. Or I, let me go back to, I define some function. Yes, this one, for instance. Well, okay, the syntax highlighting is not all that impressive for this one, but the reason I have all this nice syntax highlighting is thanks to one of those plugins, the syntax highlighting one, and those are links to the GitHub repos, of course. So once you've installed it, there's nothing to do to use that one. Now, the history substring search, maybe reduce this a little bit. So probably all of you know that you can search through your history with the arrow bars or the Control-P, Control-N keys, but that only searches, I mean, that searches all of your history. So if I'm interested in aliases, if I want to rerun some command that starts with alias, I mean, I can know about this thing forever, or I can use some function that I have written that will look into my history, or I can use this Alt-C thing that we saw, but this Alt-C only look at my very recent history. Much more convenient, I think, is this Fish-inspired history substring search. It's substring search because I can start typing a command, and then instead of using Control-P, Control-N, which is the normal history command, if I type Alt-P, Alt-N, I cycle only through the commands that start with alias. So it narrows down the amount of history I'm searching, and then that's just really convenient to find a command. And the auto-suggestion, if I start typing something, you may not be able to see it very well, but instantly I have in pale gray something that shows up, and you can have it based on your history or regular, the kind of auto-completion that you would get if you press tab. The preference being depending on the order of those arguments in your configuration, or you can even have it based on the sequence of things that you have used in your history, and you can let's look at something that has multiple arguments. Yeah, for instance, okay, yeah. So if I type FD, for instance, there is this that shows up. I can accept it all by pressing Control E, which is the typical Emacs and shell command to go to the end of the line. But I can also accept it bit by bit if I want to edit it. So I can type FD, and then instead of Control E, I can type Alt F to accept segment by segment so that I can modify the comment. So those plugins I find are really super powerful, and this is what I run in my Z shell. So this is it, we're out of time. I took a little too long, so there is not a lot of time for questions, but I am happy to stay behind if you have time to stay behind as well. I can post in the chat again the link to the website, because this is there to stay. So let me press that, and I am very happy to answer any question. If you want to unmute, we can stop the recording and we can chat. So you don't have to be shy. You're not going to end up on YouTube. Yeah.